Anik. Camp Hell. Camp Hell is a Boy Scout camp in Iowa, not the real name. It is located in a forest area near Des Moines. Being a good Christian child, I was initiated into the Cub Scouts at a young age, and then eventually the Boy Scouts. I eventually made Eagle, but that has nothing to do with this particular story. Our troop had decided that our summer trip that year would be to head to Camp Hell. There we could do our lifeguard training, COPE, which is basically rock climbing, and other random fun things. I think I was 15 or 16 at the time. We get all packed up and start the long drive down there. 6 hours later, and we reach our destination. We get all our gear out of the vehicles and start to walk down to our designated site. The camp is goddamn enormous though. The walk from the parking lot to our site took 45 minutes. Talk about being hard on the arms and legs. We finally get there though, and get to see what our lodgings will be. Our campsite was about the 50 yards around. The tents we would be sleeping in were those World War II, olive green pitch tents. Throw a couple of pallets in the bottom of them, and you're out of the mud for the most part. I opened up my tent and was greeted with an ungodly amount of spiders. The majority were daddy long legs, and wolf spiders. Back then I still had my sense of smell, and let me tell you, that tent smelled like fucking spiders. It took me a good half hour to brush all of them out of it, and get my cot set up. I opened the back of the tent, and looked down. It's on the edge of a ravine. There was a good 30-foot sharp drop off right there. Down in the bottom was a small stream and some rocky outcroppings. I walked out of the tent and saw everyone gathered around the tent next to mine. I walk over to see what the fuss is about, and take a look inside. Sitting on the ceiling of this tent is the biggest wolf spider I have ever seen. The damn thing looked like a large tarantula. It was about as big as your hand spread out, and boy was it hairy. Someone jabbed it with a stick, and the thing plopped down with a thud onto the pallet. It then ran towards the back, and leapt out into the ravine. We actually watched it glide down into the woods. So already we have an infestation of the oogly booglies in the camp. What I didn't mention was the noise. Goddamn cicadas were going off like crazy. It was one of their big years. There was an estimated 25,000 per acre, I think they said. It was so bad, that when I later walked over to a small cabin, I saw that the entire side of it was cicada shells. You couldn't see a piece of wood on that thing because of all of them. The huge snails were cool though, they were all over the damp woods. Anyway, after we got all set up, we headed to the main hall for the welcoming to the week of hell. There was some stupid shit speeches and other boring stuff that kids don't want to hear. We then dined on the finest baked beans and hot dogs. Later that night we all gathered around this huge fire, in a semicircle. There was about 1,000 of us, so it was a big fire. Behind it was this huge totem pole with a platform at the top. I'd say about 50 feet up. Standing on the platform was some fruitcake in body paint screaming. Then shirtless weirdos ran around us screaming with torches. I swear, the Boy Scouts organization is one of the weirdest in the world. After all the batshit insane stuff had died down, we were treated to stories of the camp's history. The main guy told us of all the people who had died at this camp, and of the weird creatures that lurked in the woods and lakes. The way he told the stories though was so funny, due to his crackly, whinny voice. I think the stories ended at around midnight, and we were sent back to get some sleep. So we get back to our campsite, and I'm pretty bushed, so I decide to head to bed. I crack open that tent, and flip a flashlight on, only to see that all the goddamn spiders were back. Let me tell you, a week in that place will cure you of all your arachnophobia. I didn't even bother with the spiders, I just got undressed, hopped in my sleeping bag, and conked out. 5 a.m. rolls around and I hear the blaring sound of reveille playing a few feet from my tent. Since when did I join the army? I got dressed and headed out for my first day of fun and festivities. The first thing on my agenda was COPE, so I headed down to the designated area, which was a 2-mile walk through the woods. By the time I get there I'm soaked from all the dew. About 15 of us had signed up for COPE this year. The first thing we do is go to climb the 100-foot tower, then rappel down the backside. No big deal really, we had all done it before. So we get our Swiss seats tied up, and start going up in one by one. It's nothing really to talk about. Nothing interesting happened on it my first day. So, I'll skip ahead. My first day was pretty normal for the most part. Cope, followed by canoe safety, then some other stuff that I can't remember. That night was once again filled with spiders and 100 degrees plus humidity. We had to get up the next day at the same time. This day though I had to go to the mess hall and prepare the table for breakfast. Cue me trudging through the woods at 5 in the morning. I noticed that the woods were dead quiet for the most part, besides the common sound of rabbits or squirrels. The cicadas hadn't come out yet, so it was less annoying. It was still dark out, so I had a flashlight with me to guide my way through the trees. I don't know what made me look up, but when I shined my light up at the tops of the trees I saw something. A large black image was leaping through the treetops at a fast pace. It went directly over me, then off in the direction I had just came from. My light didn't carry on it for too long, but long enough for me to confirm that I had seen something strange. It didn't make a sound, which was pretty weird. I had already seen some strange stuff in my life at this point, so I wasn't really scared at all. I just kept moving onward towards the mess hall. It took me about 30 minutes to get there, and once again I was soaked up to my knees in dew. Setting up the table only took about 15 minutes, and by 6 everyone had shown up and started eating. After breakfast they sang songs about using the pancakes as toilet paper and coffee for cuts. Really, Boy Scouts equals weird. After breakfast it was off to another uneventful day of cope. Then onward to canoe safety. Today during my canoe class, we had to go out into the middle of the murky lake and sink my canoe. Then attempt to unsink it. The only thing that worried me about that lake was the unusually high amount of large snapping turtles. Those things were mean too. I didn't want one of those taking a finger off or a chunk of flesh. Our instructor demonstrated how to do it properly. He would sink his, then 2 other canoes would pull up and you would work your canoe to the surface, then kind of stack it on the other 2 so it could drain out properly. It seemed pretty pointless to me. Since if you're by yourself, you're not going to get it out from underwater. I waited until my turn, then I rowed out into the middle of the lake. I started rocking my canoe until it flipped and started to go under. The damn thing only sank about 5 feet down, so I was able to stand on it underwater. The instructor sent out 2 guys with canoes as soon as mine was sunken. I had a good 10-minute wait though. So, I stood there on my sunken canoe waiting for those slow-ass people to work their way out. I felt the canoe start moving from under my feet, as if a current was pulling on it. I kicked my heel over the edge of a support beam in it to hold on. That stopped the canoe dead in its tracks. Suddenly I felt something wrap around my ankle and pull me down. It pulled hard enough to submerge me completely, even with my life jacket on. I open my eyes up under the water and see these pale rotting hands fly at my face and grab my ears. A screaming face is then thrust into mine. I could hear the screaming perfectly, even though I was underwater. I start frantically trying to get away. I'm kicking and waving my arms as hard as I can. It seemed like an eternity, but the thing let go of me, and I was able to make it to the surface. My life jacket bobs me up above the water line, where I proceed to cough and sputter. The guys in canoes show up just as I bob up to the surface, so I start trying to climb into one of their canoes as fast as I can. They won't let me though. You have to get yours out before you can come back. God damn it. I told them something underwater had grabbed me, but they told me to stop making shit up and get my canoe out. So, I did just that while all the time wondering if something was going to grab me and drag me to my death. I get my canoe out, and floating again, then speed into shore. When I get there, the instructor asked me why I was underwater for so long. I told him of what had just happened, and he said, "Oh yeah, that happens." That happens? What the hell kind of place is this? I went down to the showers to get cleaned up, but am greeted with a fat elderly man showering naked, so I waited. This place was giving me a serious case of the heebie-jeebies. I eventually got showered up, and walked back to my campsite, where I planned on taking a nap. I laid down for a good hour, but couldn't get to sleep on account of all those damn cicadas going crazy. So, I decided to hang out with my buddies for a bit. They wanted to go explore the woods, so of course I went with. We all found some nice branches, and made them into walking sticks, and we were off. We found a path down the ravine behind our campsite and took it. We then followed the stream for a while. The stream turned into a small river with some fast current going down it. I was checking out the little fish that were swimming around in the nice clear water, while my friends walked off further down the path. I was waiting for a friend to catch up anyway. I glanced over at a huge pile of branches that were hung up on a bend in the river. I see something weird sticking out of them. I walk over that way, and finally see what it is. A nice mangled torso slung up in the branches. Intestines were floating out of the eviscerated stomach. And it wasn't fresh at all. The whole thing was a pale white, and looked like it had been there for a while. I start yelling for them to come look at it. Nobody was coming yet though. That's what I hear. I look at the torso again, and here Dona head then slowly cranes its way out of the rushing waters, and stares at me. There is no lower jaw on the head, and the eyes are popped out of it. The lips are huge and purple. It says don't once again. I take off like a bat out of hell, screaming my head off. I ran and ran, until I saw the friend that I was waiting for. He's yelling what's the matter at me while I'm running up to him. I catch my breath and tell him that I had saw the torso caught up in the branches. We bust ass back to the spot, and take a look at the branches. There's death there all right, but it wasn't what I had saw. It was a freshly killed deer this time. Still had all its hair and color. He questions me as to why it was such a big deal. I explained to him the whole time, but he would just laugh and tell me to stop trying to scare him. He went on to catch up with the other guys. I just headed back to the camp at a very fast pace. Behind me I could hear the word "don't" echoing through the ravine. What does it mean? I couldn't figure it out. No one else at the camp would believe me. They said it was either making up stories, or my imagination. Fuck, imagination. Last time I checked, people don't imagine ripped up torsos and talking severed heads. I already wanted to go home. This place was too fucked up for me, and apparently other people had shit happen to them here also. I still had 4 more days to look forward to though. That night there was a huge electrical storm. I'm talking big. There was so much lightning that it was brighter than daylight out. I was lucky enough to be in the tent 5 feet from the tall metal flagpole. Lucky me. The wind was howling at about 50 miles per hour. Everybody except a few of us had moved into the wooden shack that stored our firewood. I was one of the lucky people that got to stay in the tents. The wind was so strong that it was untying the double knots that I had made to keep the tent flaps closed. It wasn't raining at all though, thankfully. More and more spiders had decided to get out of the storm. By now my sleeping bag was covered in smooshed spiders from my rolling around at night. I tried to get to sleep, but the thunder was so constant and loud that it was just impossible at first. Then the talking started. Don't. That thing was yelling at me from the river. Over and over it would yell "don't" at me. I flung the sleeping bag over my head to stop the noise of the thunder, wind, and talking. It was pointless though, everything got through. I must have eventually fell asleep, because before I knew it, it was daytime again. Today was the day I had been at first looking forward to, but now I dreaded it. It was the oh so fantastic survival trial. We are given a tarp, a sleeping bag, a small shovel, a bucket, a book of matches, and our knife. Then we are supposed to go deep into the woods and make a campsite for the night. This was not a good thing for me, after all that I had went through. First thing to do was try go find a good spot to set up. I headed over to the huge bridge that went over the ravine, and tried to set up under it. But saw someone else there, and they were getting peed on by people on the bridge. So, that was a no-go. I tried a couple of other places. I was looking for a good, elevated flat spot, that was away from that river or stream or whatever it was. I found a good area that was about a mile into the woods. I to this day don't know how they got away with this stuff back then. Sending kids into the woods unattended, it's so unsafe. But oh well, what can you do? I'm sure they don't allow it anymore these days. The spot I found was on the top of a little hill, with a nice big tree. So, if there was rain, it would all go down, and not pool up around me. I dug a small ditch which resembled a shallow grave. I covered the dirt in it with pine needle and dry leaves. I set my sleeping bag in it. I used the tarp as a makeshift tent. I was proud of my campsite when I was done. It looked pretty damn good. I then went off and gathered a decent amount of firewood. I dug a tiny pit, and lined it with rocks. That was where I would have my fire. I found a nice flat rock that I could use for cooking and set it next to the fire. Then, I went down to the lake and pulled up the lines I had set earlier. The lines had 6 baited hooks on them, and I had thrown them into the water along the shore. Most of the hooks were full with mediocre-sized rock base, but I kept them. Part of the survival course was catching and eating your own food. Night rolled around and I had eaten my fish that were cooked on the flat rock in the fire. I sat there alone, smoking about a half a pack of cigs that I couldn't touch until I was alone. At least that was one good thing about this survival crap. It was a calm night. The storm the night before had blown all the bad stuff away apparently. There was only the sound of crickets and the crackling fire. I sat there enjoying my fire and nicotine for quite a while. Then I noticed that all the crickets had stopped chirping. Well, isn't that the best sound ever? When they do that, it means something is about to die. I had this happen later on in life, but that's part of another story. I looked around into the dark woods, but my small fire didn't light up much. I heard the crunching of dead leaves and sticks off in the direction behind me. I figured someone must be out checking on us survivalists. I called out hello, and waited for an answer, but got none. The crunching kept going on off into the distance, away from me, and soon faded into nothing. I thought it was someone just being a prick. I rolled my bag out into my shallow grave. Man, that sounds bad, doesn't it? I hopped into the bag, and snuggled in. It was actually quite comfortable. I was pretty surprised with how well things were turning out. It didn't take me long to fall asleep. I woke up some time later. My eyes opened and I stared into the face of something. I was still very groggy, so I just looked until my eyes adjusted. It was some sort of beast. It was just inches from me. The thing had stuck its head under my tarp and was eyeballing me, kinda. It had no eyes. Imagine a deformed wolf, with no eyes, or eye sockets. It was huge, and white. It inched closer to my face till it was almost touching. I'm trying my hardest not to move or scream my head off. It starts to smell me. Its hot, stagnant nose breath wafts over my face. The smell is terrible. It smelled like the essence of death. It sniffed for a few seconds, then started to growl slightly. The growling got louder, and louder, until it whipped its massive head around and looked over its shoulder. I move my eyes over and see that it's looking at something. What it's looking at is, fuck, I don't know. It was like a tall, skinny human being that was hunched over. By tall I mean about 9 feet tall. It was naked, and had no mouth or arms. It was looking right at me. The growling turned into snarling. I could see the wolf thing's mouth open. Inside were several sets of teeth, like a shark would have. The wolf-type thing turned around, roared at this humanoid thing off in the distance. The tall thing started backing up slowly, while the wolf thing was walking at it slowly. I'm laying here with the biggest amount of fear and what the fuck rolling through my mind. In an instant the wolf thing leaps into the air and slams into the tall thing. The tall thing starts writhing around on the ground. I could hear muffled screams coming from its non-existent mouth. The wolf was snapping and biting at it. I could hear flesh being ripped from bones, followed by the crunching of bones. I fucking black out at this point. I couldn't take that much shit in one sitting. I wake up and look at my wristwatch. It is 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Fuck. I had been sleeping for a very long time. I get up and remember what I had seen. Was it all a dream? Apparently not. There is black tar-like stuff splattered all around my camp. I could only assume it was blood from those things. There was huge patches of dirt kicked up, and a tree was snapped in half not more than 10 feet from where I was sleeping. It was a tree about the size of a leg. I decided the shit must have actually happened, so I got my shit packed up and ran back to the main camp. When I got back, I was greeted with a lot of "Where the hell were you?" I explained to them that I had overslept. I found some of the other guys that had done the survival course, and had a word with them. I asked them if they had anything strange happen to them during their stay in the woods. Only one person said that he had seen something lurking around in the dark. He said it was shaped like a dog, only a lot bigger. The other people seemed uneasy, so I don't know if they were telling the truth about noticing nothing, or if they were hiding something. At 5 p.m. I headed over to my COPE class for the biggest fun we were going to have. That would be the second longest zip line in the world. Or it was at the time. I'm sure there are some bigger ones by now. To get to the zip line, you have to climb up this wire ladder onto the top of a light pole. Then grab onto one wire, and walk across another wire to the other side, which is another light pole. It's about a 20-yard wire walk. At that point you get yourself hooked up and take off. I don't even remember how long it is, but it's a long damn way to the other end. You fly over the ravine and a ton of forest. At the other end are your fellow Boy Scouts ready to stop you. There's a bunch of bed mattresses nailed to trees too. Well, that's comforting. I had to wait an hour before it was my turn because someone chickened out, and had to be forcibly removed from the pole. It took me 15 minutes to walk to the line start from the end, so that kinda shows how long a distance it is. I get up the ladder, and make my way across the wire. I get hooked up to the line, and kick off the platform. The zip line takes off like a bolt of lightning. I'm soaring over the land, and it is just kick-ass. I look down as I pass over the ravine and see a mass of thousands of bodies writhing around. They are reaching up at me and screaming. I throw up all over myself. I get to the other end, and am shaking terribly bad as they catch my line and help me off. They pass it off as me being scared, and the rush getting to me. It wasn't though. I had enough of this place, it was too much now. I waited around at the end for the instructor's girlfriend to come down the line. We got radio that she had started, but she never showed up. What the hell happened to her? Turns out that she got above the ravine, and her hair flew up into the pulley and got caught. It halfway scalped her. That was a very bad thing. She hadn't tied her hair back and put it under her helmet like she was told to. A rescue guy had to climb out to the middle where she was stranded